I grew up in a quiet suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew your name and lawns were mowed on weekends. My parents were cautious, especially my mom, who had a way of imagining the worst in the world. I think that's why I always felt a little invisible growing up. My shy nature made it easy to blend into the background. I spent my high school years sketching in my notebook, doodling faces of strangers I'd pass on the street or drawing imaginary cities. Talking to people wasn't exactly my strong suit, but I liked the predictability of routine and the safety of home. After graduation, I got a job at Target. It was summer of 2018 and I was 19, trying to save for community college. Evening shifts fit perfectly because I liked the quiet rhythm of stocking shelves after the afternoon rush. The work wasn't glamorous, but I liked the structure. The aisles were organized, the products lined neatly, and everything had a place. I was learning to force myself to greet strangers, to ask, "Did you find everything okay?" without my voice shaking. It was practice, I told myself, for stepping into the bigger world someday. One night, around late September, I noticed him for the first time. He was in his mid-40s, greasy hair, and wore a camo jacket that looked like it had seen better days. He didn't have a cart, didn't pick up anything. He just wandered the aisles, occasionally glancing my way. At first, I shrugged it off, telling myself he was just another customer. But the way he moved, hovering near me like a shadow, made my skin crawl. Later, when I was helping at the registers, I noticed him lingering near the self-checkout, pretending to browse, but his eyes kept finding mine. Maya, my co-worker, leaned over and whispered, "Creeper vibes, right?" I laughed nervously, but my stomach twisted. By the time closing came at 10, he was gone. I felt relief, a heavy sigh escaping me as I clocked out and slung my backpack over my shoulder. Walking home alone had always been easy. 15 minutes through quiet streets, but that night each shadow felt heavier. As I cut down a side street, I heard footsteps behind me. My pulse spiked. I glanced back. The camo jacket. He was following, keeping his distance but following. My mind raced as I picked up my pace, weaving through yards, hopping fences, desperate to reach my front door. By the time I slammed it shut behind me, my chest heaving, I realized how fragile the illusion of safety could be. The next morning, the memory of the night made me jittery. I didn't sleep well, waking at odd hours, imagining shadows on my bedroom walls. I decided I wasn't walking home anymore. Maya agreed to drive me to and from work, and for a few days, life seemed almost normal. I stocked shelves, greeted customers, and tried to ignore the lingering unease. But then, it happened again. One afternoon, as I was arranging electronics, I saw him. Same camo jacket, same restless eyes pretending to browse while he watched me. My stomach dropped. I went straight to the manager after my shift. "There's a guy who's been following me," I explained, voice tight with anxiety. "I saw him at the store tonight." She frowned, her brow knitting together. "Call the police," she said firmly. "We'll handle this." 2 officers came that evening, taking my statement in detail. They asked about the man's appearance, how he behaved, where he had been following me. One officer muttered under his breath, "We know this guy. He's been trouble before." That only heightened my unease. I could picture him out there somewhere, waiting, watching, his presence a threat I couldn't ignore. A week later, relief finally came. News reports said he had led the police on a car chase after being caught with meth and stolen goods, arrested, taken into custody. I should have felt safe again. I should have breathed easy. But the memory of those footsteps, the crunch of gravel behind me, the way his eyes had locked onto mine, didn't leave. Even driving to work with Maya, I caught myself glancing in the side mirror repeatedly, half expecting him to be there, lurking in the shadows. My sense of normalcy had been fractured, and I realized just how much fear could linger long after danger itself had passed. Months went by, but I couldn't shake the vigilance. I started keeping my phone in my hand when walking in public, even during the day. I avoided shortcuts through empty streets and made a habit of checking over my shoulder constantly. My parents noticed the change. Mom worried more than ever. Dad suggested self-defense classes. I nodded politely, but deep down, I knew nothing could truly erase the unease that had seeped into me. It was in the way I moved, the way I hesitated, the way I flinched at unfamiliar voices behind me. At Target, I stayed polite, helpful, and friendly, but there was always a part of me scanning for danger. Every customer with a camo jacket, every man wandering aimlessly, made my heart beat faster. I found myself replaying the night in my mind over and over, imagining different scenarios, wondering what would have happened if I hadn't made it to my doorstep in time. Fear, I realized, wasn't just a response to immediate danger. It was a shadow that lingered, shaping your choices long after the threat was gone. It also changed how I trusted others. I didn't believe strangers were inherently dangerous, but I learned that some people could project a quiet menace that made even ordinary places feel unsafe. I became more cautious, more aware, and more deliberate in my actions. But I also started to notice the kindness of people like Maya, who drove me without complaint, or my manager, who took my concerns seriously. Their presence reminded me that even in a world where threats could feel random and personal, not everyone was a danger. Some people truly looked out for others. The incident left me wary but wiser. I learned to respect my instincts, to recognize unease as a signal, and to act on it rather than dismiss it. I learned that safety wasn't something guaranteed, it was something you had to protect through awareness and careful choices. Most importantly, I learned that fear, while natural, could be managed with support, preparation, and vigilance. It didn't have to control your life forever. Looking back, I realized that night taught me a lot about boundaries, awareness, and the fragility of safety. Fear doesn't always fade, but understanding it, acknowledging it, and taking proactive steps can give you back a sense of control. I never saw him again after the arrest, but the experience stayed with me as a quiet reminder. The world can be unpredictable, but you can still navigate it carefully, alert, and resilient. Pay attention to your instincts and take personal safety seriously, but don't let fear define your life. Awareness, caution, and the support of those around you can help you reclaim your sense of security even after unsettling experiences. I never thought moving to Minneapolis would feel this lonely. Back home in Madison, Wisconsin, I always had someone to call if I wanted company, even if it was just my mom reminding me to eat dinner or my younger brother asking for help with his math homework. When I moved here in the fall of 2017 for nursing school, I told myself the distance would be good for me. Independence, growth, the words people use when they're trying to convince themselves they made the right choice. But in the quiet of my one-bedroom apartment, with the radiator hissing and my textbooks stacked like towers on the kitchen table, I realized how much I missed familiar faces. I spent most of my time studying or walking around the city, convincing myself I was adjusting fine. Still, every time I locked my door at night, the weight of my past pressed in. It wasn't something I liked to talk about. During my freshman year of college, back when I was just 18, I'd been followed home by a stranger near campus. I can still feel the burn in my lungs from sprinting across the quad, the sound of his shoes slapping the pavement behind me, the way my legs gave out the second I slammed my dorm door shut. He never caught me, and maybe it wasn't even as close as I imagined, but the terror of that night branded itself into me. My friends teased me later for being paranoid, for checking behind me on walks, for refusing to cut through alleys. But they hadn't felt it. That heat in your blood when you know someone has picked you, singled you out. Now, in a bigger city, I carried that memory like a survival kit. I knew which streets were well lit, which coffee shops stayed open late, which bus routes avoided quiet stretches. I even knew the trick of pretending to talk on the phone so people thought I wasn't alone. Most of the time, those habits made me feel prepared. Other times they just made me feel tired. On a chilly October evening, I decided to make a Target run. It was one of those nights where I needed something ordinary to ground me. Cleaning supplies, maybe a scented candle to cover the faint smell of radiator heat. I told myself it was no different than the trips I used to take back home, wandering aisles just to clear my head. The parking lot on Nicollet Avenue buzzed under harsh yellow lamps, and the air smelled faintly of exhaust and leaves. I parked under one of the lights, the way my dad always reminded me, and pushed a cart toward the entrance. Inside, the store was quiet. Families wandered through Halloween displays. Kids giggled over plastic vampire teeth, and a couple of teenagers argued about which candy was better for trick-or-treaters. I felt myself relax, humming softly as I picked up paper towels and a cheap pumpkin candle. That's when I noticed him. A man stood near the entrance, too still, as if rooted to the ground. He wore a faded jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. At first I thought he was waiting for someone, but then I saw his eyes. They weren't drifting around the store. They were fixed. On me. I kept moving, convincing myself I was overreacting. Maybe he was waiting for his wife or his kid was in the bathroom. I tried not to look again, focusing instead on the shelves stacked with disinfectant and sponges. But I couldn't shake the sensation that I wasn't alone. When I rolled my cart toward the seasonal aisle, my stomach dropped. He was there again, pretending to study racks of glow-in-the-dark skeletons, though his gaze wasn't on the plastic bones. It was on me. I froze for a second too long. His eyes were heavy, deliberate, like he wasn't embarrassed to be caught. I forced myself to breathe, pretending to scroll on my phone. Maybe if I acted casual, he'd get bored. I turned down another aisle, quickening my pace. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not rushed, not hurried, just steady. I glanced back, and there he was. Closer now, his stare sinking lower toward my legs. I gripped the cart handle so tight my knuckles hurt. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. But another part of me, the one shaped by years of being called paranoid, argued I was making a scene over nothing. When I passed an end cap, I saw a young Target employee stacking soda cans. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Excuse me, there's a man following me." The boy blinked, startled. He looked barely 19, maybe his first job. "Which man?" he asked quietly. I tilted my head slightly without turning fully. He followed my glance. His face changed instantly. His jaw tightened. He nodded. "Stay near the registers," he said. "I'll call security." Relief washed over me, though it was thin, fragile. I wheeled my cart toward the front, trying not to rush. My pulse pounded in my ears. For the next 10 minutes, I lingered near self-checkout, pretending to browse magazines. 2 employees hovered casually nearby, pretending to tidy displays. But when I looked up, my stomach dropped again. The man hadn't left. He stood near electronics, not touching a single item, his face turned directly toward me. His eyes were unblinking, unmoving. I abandoned the candle and paper towels in my cart. My legs shook as I walked to the register. An older woman cashier came over, her voice gentle. "We can walk you out when you're ready, honey." I nodded, whispering, "Can we use the side exit?" "Of course," she said. "Don't look at him." Her words made my chest tighten. "Don't look at him." The cashier guided me through a staff door near customer service. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead as we stepped into a dim hallway, then out a side door into the night air. The parking lot looked different now, every shadow sharper, every headlight suspicious. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked. I nodded, though my voice caught. I just want to get home." She stayed with me until I reached my car, watching as I fumbled the keys. My hands were trembling too hard. I finally unlocked the door, threw my bag onto the passenger seat, and climbed in. I glanced at the entrance as I pulled out. The man was nowhere in sight. For the first few blocks, I kept checking my rearview mirror. Every car behind me made my stomach lurch. I took 3 turns I didn't need to, weaving through side streets just to be sure. Only after 10 minutes of detours did I finally believe I wasn't being followed. When I reached my apartment, I sat in the car for a long time, the silence pressing against me. My hands rested on the steering wheel, frozen. I couldn't bring myself to get out. Not until I'd checked my mirrors one more time. Inside my apartment, I locked every door and window. I turned on the TV just for noise, but every creak of the building sounded like footsteps outside. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning, replaying the man's stare. The next morning, I told myself it was over. Just a stranger. Just a scare. But when I drove past Target on my way to campus, I couldn't look at it the same. The red bullseye sign didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like a place where someone had marked me, where I'd been prey. Over the next week, I tried to bury the memory. Schoolwork helped. Clinical rotations kept me busy. But at night, when I lay in bed, my mind circled back. I'd ask myself questions I couldn't answer. Who was he? Did he pick me at random? Or had he been waiting for someone like me? A friend from class invited me to study one evening, and I admitted I didn't feel comfortable going out alone at night anymore. She frowned. "You're not paranoid," she said firmly. "You're cautious. There's a difference." Her words stuck with me. But still, I couldn't shake the thought that I'd see him again. In a city this big, what were the chances? And yet every time I walked into a store, I found myself scanning faces. One night I stopped at a CVS near my apartment. As I grabbed shampoo, I felt it, the same weight of eyes. My body stiffened. I turned slowly, heart hammering. It wasn't him. Just a young guy picking up cough drops. He barely noticed me. Still, the panic was already there, flooding me, convincing me I had to get out. I started to realize this was the part no one talks about. It isn't just the encounter itself. It's the after. The way you start doubting your instincts, doubting everyone around you, doubting your own ability to feel safe. A few weeks later, I went back to Target. I needed groceries, and I couldn't avoid it forever. My palms were sweaty as I pushed a cart through the entrance. I half expected to see him there, waiting. He wasn't. I picked up what I needed, moving quickly. When I passed seasonal aisles now filled with Christmas decorations, my chest tightened. The ghosts of that night still lingered. At checkout, the same older cashier smiled at me. She must have remembered. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly. I swallowed, managing a smile. "Better, I think." Walking back to my car, I realized she wasn't just asking about shopping. She was asking about being okay in the world again. And the truth was, I wasn't there yet. Maybe I never would be. But I also knew something else. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. My instincts had saved me once before, and maybe they had saved me again that October night. I loaded my groceries, locked my doors, and drove home. The city stretched ahead of me, full of strangers. Some harmless, some not. I couldn't control who I crossed paths with. But I could control one thing, listening to myself when something felt wrong. And I promised myself I always would. Trusting your instincts isn't paranoia, it's survival. When something feels wrong, listen to it. Even if others downplay your fears, your safety is worth more than their comfort. Staying cautious isn't weakness, it's... I was 26 when I moved to Portland, Oregon in the summer of 2019. It was the first time I really thought of a city as mine. I'd always drifted between places, college towns, short-term rentals, months spent staying with friends while freelancing. But Portland felt different. I had Ethan, my boyfriend, and we had finally decided to live together. He was a bartender, always gone at night, while I worked as a freelance illustrator. Our schedules never aligned. Sometimes I'd be up sketching until 3 in the morning, headphones in, and he'd be walking in just as the sun came up, smelling like whiskey and cigarettes. Other nights, I'd be curled up in bed while he worked a double shift downtown. We made it work. At least I told myself we did. But on the nights when my apartment was too quiet and my imagination too loud, I felt a familiar unease rising in me. The kind that had followed me since childhood. When I was 12, my father disappeared for 3 days. He wasn't dead. He wasn't even missing in the way the police cared about. He was drunk. They found him passed out in a stranger's yard 2 towns over. I didn't understand any of that at the time. All I knew was that for 3 days I woke up not knowing if he was alive. That kind of fear changes you. It makes the world tilt, as if everything can collapse at any moment. Ethan knew bits of that story. He'd heard me joke that I was paranoid about people disappearing. But it wasn't a joke. I carried it like a scar. That summer I found comfort in little rituals. One of them was going to Target late at night. Portland's 82nd Avenue location wasn't the nicest, but there was something calming about wandering aisles when the store was nearly empty. No crowds, no noise, just me and the sterile hum of fluorescent lights. Ethan teased me about it, but sometimes he came along, half asleep, waiting in the car while I shopped. On one humid night in July, I convinced him. "Please," I begged. "I've been craving onion rings for a week. Just come with me. It'll take 10 minutes. He groaned, rubbing his eyes. "You and your midnight snack cravings." I kissed his cheek and grinned. "You love it." We pulled into the Target lot just before midnight. The asphalt was still damp from a summer shower, the air heavy with the smell of wet concrete and grass. Only a handful of cars sat scattered across the wide lot. Ethan slouched behind the wheel, yawning so hard his jaw popped. "Grab your stuff quick, babe. I'm running on fumes." "Fine," I teased. "But if I get lost in the snack aisle, it's your fault." I stepped out, the night air cool against my bare arms. The automatic doors slid open with a mechanical sigh, spilling bright white light across the dark pavement. Inside, the store was eerily still. The cashier was a kid, maybe 18 or 19, with heavy-lidded eyes and a pale complexion that made him look half dead. His name tag read, Cole. He barely glanced at me, slouching against the register, his movement slow and detached. Something about his vacant stare made my stomach tighten, but I brushed it off. I pushed a red cart straight to frozen foods. Onion rings, a soda, maybe something sweet. The hum of the freezers was the only sound. For a moment, it was the quiet comfort I loved. But that peace shattered the second I returned to the front and looked outside. Ethan's car door was wide open. The driver's seat was empty. At first, I thought Ethan was playing around. He had a dry sense of humor, and sometimes he teased me about being jumpy. Maybe he'd slipped inside to surprise me. But when I scanned the store, there was no sign of him. Just Cole at the register, rubbing his temples like he was falling asleep on his feet. I stepped outside, calling softly, "Ethan?" The parking lot was silent except for the buzz of the lamps overhead. My heart raced as I approached the car. The driver's seatbelt dangled loosely and Ethan's phone sat abandoned on the seat. Ethan never went anywhere without his phone. My chest tightened. Panic pressed in, cold and sharp. I darted back inside. My voice shook. "My boyfriend, he's gone. He was waiting in the car and now..." Cole looked at me blankly. His expression didn't change, didn't even flicker. Then he sighed, like I had just told him the milk was out of stock. "Happens sometimes." "What?" My voice cracked. "What do you mean happens sometimes?" He tilted his head, almost smiling. "You should have kept him close." The way he said it, it was flat, detached, but the words cut like glass. My hands shook as I took a step back. "What the hell are you talking about?" That's when Cole crouched behind the counter. I thought maybe he was grabbing a phone to call security, but when he rose, he was holding a rifle. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't aim at me. Not yet. He sprinted toward the sliding doors, his sneakers squeaking against the tile. The rifle gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Stop!" I screamed, but my voice was lost in the echo. The automatic doors hissed open. Cole burst into the night. Seconds later, the crack of gunfire ripped through the silence. One shot, then another. I collapsed behind a checkout counter, covering my head. My chest heaved. I fumbled for my phone, whispering frantically to the 911 dispatcher. "Please, My boyfriend's missing. There's a man with a gun. I think he shot someone. I couldn't finish. My throat was raw. The dispatcher's voice was calm, grounding me just enough to breathe. Stay inside. Lock the doors if you can. My hands shook as I pulled the glass doors shut and slid the lock into place. My reflection stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed, while outside, the night swallowed everything whole. Minutes passed like hours. Every sound made me jump. The hum of the lights, the distant clatter of a cart outside, the echo of my own breath. I tried calling Ethan's phone again, but it buzzed uselessly from the car seat. Finally, silence fell. Too much silence. I gripped my keys like a weapon and forced myself to step outside. The air was thick and humid, my skin clammy with sweat. The lot looked deserted. Then I saw him. Cole. He was sprawled near the cart corral, his limbs twisted unnaturally. Blood pooled beneath his head. A scalpel protruded from his neck. I froze. My brain refused to process it. The rifle lay beside him, abandoned. That's when I noticed the trail, a faint smear of blood leading away from his body. My legs moved without permission, following it across the lot past the delivery area, toward a shed-like structure near the dumpsters. The door was ajar. A dull orange glow spilled out. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I stepped closer. Inside, Ethan lay on a metal table. His shirt had been cut open, his chest glistening with blood. His eyes fluttered open, glazed but alive. "Melissa," he rasped, his hand lifted weakly. Beside him stood a man in a white lab coat, calmly adjusting surgical tools. His expression was serene, clinical, like he was prepping for a routine operation. Next to him was a woman in a red dress, her lips painted crimson, her hair falling in dark waves over her shoulders. She looked at me and smiled, as if welcoming me to a dinner party. "We harvest what others waste," she said softly. "Your boyfriend was chosen. You can stay and join him, or you can walk away and live." Her voice was calm, almost soothing. My knees buckled. "Please, please don't hurt him." The man lifted a scalpel, his face unreadable. The woman tilted her head, studying me. "Choose quickly." Tears blurred my vision. My whole body screamed to run, but my heart anchored me in place. Ethan's hand reached toward me. His eyes begged. I thought of my father, of the helplessness of not knowing where he was, if he was alive. I couldn't relive that. Not again. But the woman's eyes burned into me and the scalpel hovered above Ethan's chest. My voice broke. "I'm sorry." I backed away, each step heavier than the last. Ethan's voice cracked, weak, desperate. "Don't." I turned and ran. My legs barely carried me, my chest searing with each breath. The night swallowed me whole. By the time the police arrived, the shed was empty. The orange light was gone, the tools vanished. The woman and the man disappeared as though they had never been there. Only Ethan remained, barely alive, his chest crudely stitched, his breath shallow. The paramedics rushed him to the hospital. I followed, numb, my hands still stained with sweat and tears. At the hospital, I sat in the waiting room, shaking. Hours blurred. Doctors moved in and out, murmuring words I could barely register. Ethan survived, but the damage went deeper than the stitches on his chest. He barely spoke to me after that night. We tried to move on, but something in us broke. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the woman in red, smiling, waiting. I woke from dreams drenched in sweat, her voice echoing, "You should have kept him close." Ethan pulled away from me. He blamed me for leaving him, though he never said it outright. I blamed myself too. The distance grew until we were strangers living under the same roof. Eventually, he packed his things and left. I didn't stop him. Years later, I still avoid Target. I still scan parking lots before stepping out of my car. And in the quiet hours of night when the city feels too big and too empty, I think about the shed, about the woman's calm smile, about the way she promised someone else would be chosen next. I wonder if that someone has already been taken. Fear can paralyze, but choices define us. Sometimes survival demands impossible decisions, and the weight of those choices never truly fades. Trusting instincts, valuing the lives of those close to us, and speaking out when something feels wrong are not signs of weakness. They are our strongest defenses. The cost of hesitation or silence can be far greater than fear itself. I was 21 in the fall of 2016, stuck in that strange space between being an adult and still feeling like a kid fumbling around in the dark. I went to college in Salt Lake City, taking morning classes that never seemed to add up to anything, and then worked evenings at the Target on 2100 South. My apartment was nothing more than a crash pad I shared with two guys who barely spoke to me, unless it was about whose turn it was to take the trash out. Life felt like it was on a loop. Wake up, classes, drive, beep items across the scanner, smile at strangers, drive home, sleep. Ever since I was young, I had carried a cautious edge with me. My mom used to drill it into me. Never let a stranger decide where you go. If you give them that power, you'll lose more than you think. She said it because my cousin, Robbie, had once been lured by some guy at a bus stop and ended up missing for 2 terrifying days. They found him safe, but the story never left our family. It carved into me like a warning etched on stone. That late September night, the store buzzed with people. Halloween was coming, and the shelves were lined with plastic skeletons and pumpkin candy buckets. I was on register 8, ringing up a line of customers. A mom with a cart of decorations, a college kid with microwavable dinners, a guy buying nothing but dog food. Same rhythm, same repetition. I had learned how to smile automatically, how to nod without meaning it. And then I saw her. At first she seemed unremarkable, a woman in her 30s, pale skin, shoulder-length dark hair, gray hoodie, jeans. She held a pack of gum like it was the only thing she needed in the world. She got in line, and just when it was about to be her turn, she placed the gum on a nearby shelf and walked away. No glance at me, no smile, just a sharp turn and gone. I didn't think much of it. Customers did that all the time. Maybe she remembered she didn't have cash. Maybe she changed her mind. But 15 minutes later, I spotted her again near the entrance, standing by the self-checkouts. She wasn't buying anything, she wasn't holding anything, she was just watching. I blinked, checked out another customer, and when I looked again, she was gone. The night dragged the way only retail nights could. You start counting down the minutes, pretending not to glance at the clock every few seconds, telling yourself you'll make it through if you just keep scanning items and bagging them. But my focus was broken. Every time my eyes wandered toward the aisles, I found myself searching for her. She reappeared around 9:30. This time, she leaned casually against a support pillar near the cafeteria seating area, half in shadow. Her arms were crossed, and her face was blank, but her eyes, those eyes were locked on me. My chest tightened. It felt like when you wake up from a nightmare and can't move, the sense of being pinned. I dropped my gaze to the register screen, forcing myself to act normal. Jenna, my coworker, was nearby stacking candy. She noticed something in my expression. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, her voice low. "Yeah, just tired," I lied. What was I supposed to say? That there was a woman stalking me with nothing but her stare? It sounded paranoid. Maybe it was. The store thinned out as the night wore on. By the time it was closing in on 10:30, there were only a few scattered shoppers left. My shift ended, and I clocked out. I didn't look around much as I changed into my jacket, grabbed my bag, and pushed through the glass doors into the parking lot. The night air was cool, buzzing faintly with insects circling the tall lamps. My old Honda Civic was parked near the back row, alone and small against the sea of empty spaces. I was walking toward it when I saw movement. She was there again, standing by the cart return, half hidden in shadow. When our eyes met, she raised her hand. Not in a wave, not in greeting. She curled her finger slowly, beckoning me closer. Every hair on my body stood up. I froze in place. My mother's voice echoed in my skull. Don't ever let someone you don't know decide your direction. The woman started walking, not toward me, but toward the side of the building. She moved with a strange calmness, almost like she already knew I would follow. She glanced back once, raised her hand again, curling her finger, urging me to come with her. She was heading toward the loading dock area, the part of the building where semi-trucks backed in shipments late at night. Beyond that was a patch of trees that bordered the property. For a split second, I thought about following her. Maybe she needed help. Maybe she was in trouble. But then, reality hit. No one in trouble stalks someone silently across a store for hours, waiting in shadows, never saying a word. My breath came out in a shaky rush. Nope, not tonight, I muttered under my breath. I forced my legs to move, quickening my pace toward my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands clumsy. I shoved myself into the driver's seat, locked the doors instantly, and sat there with my chest heaving. When I dared to look back up, she was closer. Just a few yards away, standing in the glow of a flickering lamp. Her expression hadn't changed, but her eyes were sharp, almost memorizing me. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her hand again. Curl, come here. My stomach flipped. I turned the key. The car roared to life, and I sped out of the lot faster than I probably should have. My hands clutched the wheel like I was afraid I'd be yanked from the car. When I finally made it back to my apartment, I sat in the car for a long minute, my knuckles white, my heart still racing. Inside, my roommates were on the couch playing video games. I told them what had happened, my words spilling out too fast. They exchanged glances and laughed it off. Probably just some weirdo. One of them shrugged. Yeah, man, you're overthinking it, the other said. I forced a laugh, but the pit in my stomach didn't go away. The next few weeks passed, but the memory of that night clung to me. Every time I worked an evening shift, I found myself scanning the store, waiting for her to show up again. I'd glance at the aisles, the self-checkouts, the cafeteria seating. Nothing. Still, when I walked to my car at night, I gripped my keys like a weapon. I checked behind me constantly. I even started parking closer to the front of the lot just in case. The managers never mentioned anything about loiterers or strange customers, so maybe it really had been just me. Maybe it was nothing. But in the quiet of my apartment, late at night, it didn't feel like nothing. Sometimes while sitting at my desk trying to write a short film idea, I'd glance out the window. My apartment faced the street, and every now and then I swore I saw movement. A figure at the edge of the lamppost glow. Not moving, just standing there. I'd blink, and it would be gone. I never told my roommates again. What was the point? They'd just laugh or call me paranoid. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was paranoid. But deep down, I knew what I had seen in that parking lot. I knew what it felt like when her eyes locked on me, and when her hand moved in that slow, deliberate curl. It wasn't random. It wasn't meaningless. Months later, the memory still haunted me. By then, the holidays had come and gone. Target was stacked with Valentine's candy, and I was still stuck on Register 8, smiling at strangers. Life was moving forward, but inside me, something had changed. I carried her with me. Not her face, not her body, but her presence. That silent pull, that demand to follow. And every time I heard my mother's voice in my head, I realized how close I had come to ignoring it. There are moments in life that look small from the outside, but you know inside they could have changed everything. That night in the parking lot was one of them. If I had followed her toward the loading dock, toward the woods, I don't think I would be here to tell this story. I never saw her again. Not at Target, not outside my apartment, not anywhere. But sometimes when I'm driving late at night, I'll catch myself checking the sidewalks, half expecting to see a figure standing there waiting. And if I ever did, I know she'd be curling her finger, telling me to come closer. But I won't. Not now. Not ever. The choices we make in small, fleeting moments can define the rest of our lives. Listening to instinct even when others laugh it off can mean the difference between safety and regret. Never hand your direction over to someone who doesn't have your best interest at heart, because once you do, you may not get it back. In the spring of 2014, I was 29 and starting over. My life felt like a mess I was trying to glue back together with shaky hands. After a breakup that gutted me more than I cared to admit, I packed up everything I owned and moved from Phoenix to Denver. I told my friends it was about career opportunities and wanting a change of scenery. But the truth was simpler. I couldn't stand walking past the coffee shop where I used to meet my ex or hearing our favorite song at the corner bar. Denver was a blank slate, and I needed that. I found a small one-bedroom near City Park. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. It felt both freeing and terrifying to live alone for the first time in years. My job as a graphic designer kept me busy, but the night stretched out endlessly. I filled the quiet with errands I didn't need, wandering through stores just to see other people. Target became my go-to. Bright, busy, familiar. It didn't feel like I was alone if I could push a cart down fluorescent aisles with strangers. My mother had raised me to be cautious. She was the kind of woman who double-checked locks 3 times before bed and side-eyed anyone who knocked on our door. "Don't trust uniforms," she used to tell me. "People aren't always who they say they are." As a kid, I rolled my eyes, embarrassed when she grilled delivery drivers or refused to let me join sleepovers she hadn't investigated thoroughly. Now, years later, her warnings replayed in my head whenever I parked in a dim lot or passed a stranger on the street. It was a gray Saturday afternoon, the kind of day where the sky threatened rain, but never followed through. I decided to drive to the Target on Colorado Boulevard. I needed snacks for the week, cleaning supplies, maybe a new notebook to sketch ideas. Simple things, comfort things. The parking lot was busy, families and couples moving with purpose while I strolled in alone. Inside, I let myself wander. I lingered in the home section, flipped through cheap notebooks in the stationery aisle, and eventually stood comparing granola bars, debating which would be the least disappointing. That's when he approached me. A tall man, mid-30s maybe, wearing a red polo shirt. No name tag. His voice was clipped, almost rehearsed. "Excuse me, ma'am. You're not supposed to be here. I'm going to need you to leave the store." I blinked at him, caught off guard. "I'm shopping," I said, holding up the box in my hand. His expression didn't shift. "You've been banned from this location. I'll escort you out." The words made my stomach drop. Banned? I had never even been inside this particular Target before. I tried to laugh it off, though my voice cracked. "You've got the wrong person." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you don't leave right now, I'll have to call the police." His eyes unsettled me. Sharp, unblinking, cold. Something in my gut twisted. He didn't look like management. He didn't carry a walkie-talkie or name badge. He was just a man in a red shirt. My mother's warning rang in my ears like a siren. Don't trust uniforms. Shoppers passed by us without a second glance. My chest tightened. I wanted to shout, to call attention, but something about the intensity in his eyes kept me frozen. Instead, I turned my cart toward the front of the store, forcing my legs to move. He followed. One step behind. Every time I pushed the cart faster, his stride matched mine. His silence was worse than if he had shouted. Near the registers, I spotted a cashier I'd seen earlier, a kid who couldn't have been older than 19. His name tag read, Evan. I rushed up to him, my voice trembling. "Can you call a manager?" Before Evan could respond, the man in red spoke sharply. "This customer's been banned. She needs to leave. Now." Evan looked between us, caught off guard. His mouth opened, then closed again. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, panic tightening my throat. "I don't know who this guy is," I said firmly. "I've never seen him before. Please, get a manager." For the first time, the man's expression cracked. His jaw tightened. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he cursed under his breath. He glanced toward the glass doors, then at me. Something shifted in his eyes, almost like calculation, and then without another word, he bolted. He ran out the sliding doors, disappearing into the parking lot. I stood frozen, the cart still in front of me, my chest heaving. A second later, the sound of sirens ripped through the air. 2 police cars screeched into the lot, lights flashing against the wide front windows. Shoppers pressed closer to the glass, murmuring, pointing. Evan leaned toward me, his voice low. "He's not staff. We've had reports and someone's been impersonating employees." My knees nearly gave out. I steadied myself against the counter, trying to catch my breath as 2 officers stormed inside, scanning the store. Out in the lot, the man darted between rows of cars, sprinting toward the side street. One officer shouted, "Stop!" But he didn't. He weaved between SUVs and vanished. The chaos was surreal. Parents pulling kids closer, people whispering about what they'd seen. An officer approached me quickly, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, did he talk to you?" I nodded shakily. "He told me I was banned. He tried to get me to leave. He followed me." The officer scribbled notes, asking for details, what he looked like, what he said, whether he touched me. My answers felt flimsy, like the whole thing might sound unbelievable. But I could still feel the heat of his presence behind me, the low threat in his voice. It was real. After giving my statement, I tried to continue my shopping. My hands shook as I reached for items, but I forced myself to finish. It felt like reclaiming control, even if it was something as small as buying granola bars. When I finally walked to my car, rain had begun to fall, fat drops hitting the asphalt hard. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it tightly, watching the store entrance. My heart pounded with the thought he might reappear at any second. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of my radiator, every passing headlight against the wall made me flinch. I replayed the moment he leaned in close, his voice sharp as a blade. "You've been banned." I thought about how easily I could have followed him out, how no one might have questioned it if he kept up his performance long enough. The idea made me sick. In the following days, I stayed on edge. I found myself checking locks twice, sometimes 3 times. I hesitated before walking into stores alone. At work, I struggled to focus, my mind circling back to that stare, that certainty in his tone, like he had rehearsed every line. A week later, an officer called to update me. The man had been spotted at several stores across the city, always wearing a red polo, always targeting women. He never hurt anyone directly, but his pattern was enough to terrify. They hadn't caught him. "He disappears before we arrive," the officer admitted. That night I sat on my couch, staring at the blank television screen. The city outside my window buzzed with life, sirens in the distance, laughter from a passing group, a dog barking. For the first time, I truly felt how vulnerable I was. Months passed, but I didn't forget. Sometimes in crowded stores, I'd catch a glimpse of red and my chest would seize. I'd turn sharply, expecting him. He never appeared again, but the fear lingered. I told my mother about it on the phone one evening. Her voice tightened. "I warned you, Riley. People aren't always who they say they are." "I know," I whispered. "You were right." Her warnings no longer felt paranoid. They felt like survival. Denver eventually grew on me. I made friends, settled into routines, even learned to enjoy the silence of living alone. But some part of me stayed sharper, more watchful. Not just at Target, but everywhere. Sometimes I wonder what he wanted. Control? Fear? To see if he could convince someone to follow? Maybe I'll never know. But I do know one thing. I listened to my instincts. And that, more than anything, saved me. The scariest dangers don't always wear masks or carry weapons. Sometimes they wear the clothes we trust, speak with authority, and expect us to obey. Trusting your instincts, questioning appearances, and refusing to give control to strangers can make all the difference. Safety begins with awareness, even when it feels uncomfortable to act on it. I never thought a retail job could be so predictable, yet somehow after 10 years I thought I'd seen it all. I was 33, divorced for nearly 5 years, and living in a cramped, slightly run-down apartment on the outskirts of Eugene, Oregon. My evenings were mostly quiet, spent tinkering with old radios I collected from thrift stores. There was comfort in the steady hum of electricity, the smell of solder, the satisfaction of making something old hum to life again. I liked routines, liked order, liked predictability, things that retail rarely offered. That November, the weather had turned damp and chilly, the kind of cold that seeps into your shoes, making you count the minutes until you can be indoors again. It was a Tuesday and I was doing my usual rounds before closing. The aisles were nearly empty, just the occasional late shopper picking up a few items. My co-workers were scattered, restocking or checking out customers, but mostly the store was quiet. I was in the hardware section, inspecting a shelf when I first noticed her. She was standing in the middle of the aisle like she belonged there, but something was off. Her skin was almost translucent under the harsh fluorescent lights, her sweater faded and worn, hair greasy and unkempt. She clutched a small box of nails, turning it over repeatedly as if it held some secret I couldn't understand. I walked toward her, offering the practiced smile of someone who has to keep strangers comfortable. "Evening, ma'am. Can I help you find something?" Her eyes lifted to meet mine. Dark, hollow, almost hollowed out. "I need iron," she said softly, her voice dry and cracking, like it had been unused for days. Iron? Like supplements?" "Those would be in the pharmacy section," I said carefully. "No. Nails, screws. I need to chew them." "For the blood," she said, almost matter-of-factly. Her voice sent a chill down my spine. Before I could respond, a new hire, Tyler, appeared at my side. He was a college kid, nervous and eager to please, barely a week into training. "Everything okay here?" he asked, smiling, though his unease was obvious. The woman's lips curled into a grotesque grin. In an instant, she ripped open the box of nails and shoved a handful into her mouth. The sound was horrifying, the metallic crunch echoing in the empty aisle. Tyler's eyes went wide. "What the—" he started, but one of the nails shot out of her mouth like a dart, hitting his shoulder. He cried out, stumbling backward. Blood started spreading across his shirt. I lunged, knocking the box from her hands. Nails scattered across the floor. She grabbed at me, her fingers clawing, her strength unnatural. "I need iron," she screamed. By the time security arrived, the damage was done. Tyler was shaking, trying to stanch the wound with a cloth I handed him. The woman fought fiercely, her eyes wild, but eventually they restrained her. Even after she was gone, the image of her face stayed with me, hollow, desperate, and hungry for something I couldn't understand. I went home that night, unable to sleep, haunted by her gaze, the sound of teeth on metal echoing in my mind. The next few days at work were a blur. Tyler had been released from the hospital, bandaged and pale, with a story that barely sounded real. The store management held a meeting, talking about mental health and security protocols, but none of it made the event feel any less raw. I couldn't stop thinking about her. I found myself walking the aisles after hours, trying to imagine what could drive someone to chew metal, to act so violently over something so primal. Rumors spread quickly among the staff. Some said she had escaped from a psychiatric ward. Others whispered about occult obsession or substance abuse. I didn't know what to believe, but her eyes, the hollow eyes, stayed in my mind. Tyler was nervous at work, flinching at sudden movements, and I had to reassure him constantly. "It's over," I told him more than once, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it myself. A week later, I was doing my usual closing rounds when I spotted her again. Well, someone who looked like her, on the surveillance monitors. My heart stopped. I checked every aisle, but she wasn't there. Security cameras showed a figure lingering outside, eyes fixed on the entrance. The thought that she could return unannounced gnawed at me. That night, after closing, I stayed late, inspecting the aisles, pushing aside the anxiety that had been growing since the incident. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was someone else, someone disturbed in a different way. Maybe my mind was exaggerating. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the quiet store, the predictable routines I loved, had been invaded. There was a new tension in the air, an awareness that something, someone, was out there, waiting, observing. Weeks passed, and things settled back into a fragile normal. Tyler returned to work full-time, though he avoided me sometimes, embarrassed and wary. I found myself hyper-aware, watching the hardware section more closely, noticing every customer's movements with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. It was during one of these shifts that I saw her again. This time, closer, in a hoodie, her face partially hidden. She wasn't chewing nails this time, but the same intensity was there, that hollow hunger in her eyes. She didn't speak, just moved slowly, methodically, like she was cataloging the store. I felt my stomach knot. My mind screamed to call security, to end this quickly, but part of me was frozen. I remembered that first night, the metallic crunch, the blood on Tyler's shirt, and I knew I couldn't let her near anyone again. When I finally approached, she stepped back, muttering, "Iron. Must have iron." Her voice was a whisper now, more desperate than threatening. Security was called, and again they took her away. But the image of her remained vivid. I started researching after that. Mental illness, psychosis, compulsive behaviors. I needed answers, or at least a way to understand. I learned about pica, a disorder where people compulsively eat non-food items. Some cases involved iron deficiency. Some involved violent behavior. None of it made it easier to face the thought of her wandering into the aisles again. Tyler, surprisingly, began coming to me for support. He admitted he'd started checking every aisle before he stocked anything, worried she might return. We bonded over our shared fear, our silent agreement that the world could be far stranger and more dangerous than we wanted to believe. Months later, the incident still haunted me. I installed extra cameras, changed routines, and began locking some areas earlier. The store seemed safer, but I never truly felt that it was. Sometimes during quiet nights I could almost hear it, the metallic crunch echoing faintly, as if carried on the hum of the fluorescent lights. I realized that life doesn't always give us neat answers or closure. Some dangers are sudden, inexplicable, and leave scars not just on the body but on the mind. I learned to respect that unpredictability, to remain vigilant, and to help those around me navigate fear when it arrives uninvited. I still love my routines, but I've learned that safety is never absolute, and sometimes the smallest disruption can remind you how fragile normal life really is. Sometimes compassion and caution must coexist. People struggle in ways we cannot always understand, and danger can lurk where we least expect it. Awareness and preparedness do not replace empathy, but they can protect those we care about when chaos appears. A routine trip to Target could turn into one of the scariest nights of my life. I'm Aaron, 22, finishing up my senior year at San Diego State. Spring of 2015 had been brutal, midterms stacked like bricks, endless papers, and more group projects than I could count. My roommate Kayla and I were both exhausted but in desperate need of a break. She suggested we hit Target on Sports Arena Boulevard late one evening. I wasn't thrilled at the idea. Crowds made me anxious. But I needed the distraction. Kayla and I had been roommates since sophomore year. She was bold, impulsive, fiercely protective. I was cautious, meticulous, maybe a little paranoid. Our differences balanced each other out, though she constantly teased me for overthinking things. Still, I trusted her judgment. She could handle herself in ways I never could. We arrived around 9:20 p.m. The store was busier than I expected for a weekday evening, families grabbing groceries, college students with carts full of snacks, aisles buzzing with the hum of fluorescent lights and soft music. I could feel the tension of the week melting off as we wandered together, laughing over the ridiculous packaging of cheap candies. After a while, we split up. I wanted to browse the snack aisle. Kayla said she'd take the cart back to the car. 10 minutes. Meet me at the entrance, she said, jingling the keys in her hand. I nodded, telling myself I'd be quick. 10 minutes turned into 20 as I picked up chips, soda, and a few frozen pizzas. I checked my phone, grinning at the memes my friends had sent, feeling the stress of the week fade away. When I finally stepped outside, my stomach sank. The car wasn't where I expected it to be. At first, I thought Kayla had parked elsewhere, but as I moved toward the far side of the lot, a man stepped into my path. He was tall, late 30s maybe, wearing a dirty ball cap and a faded black hoodie. His face was blank, his eyes cold. He didn't speak. He just started walking in the same direction as me. My pulse raced. I tried to act normal, pretending to check my phone, hoping he'd pass. He adjusted his pace to match mine. My heart slammed in my chest, each step heavier than the last. I turned sharply toward another row of cars. He followed, close behind. I could hear the echo of his steps. Panic rose like bile. I had to get inside, had to find Kayla, had to figure out what the hell was happening. I bolted back into the store, heading straight for the food court by the entrance, hands shaking as I called her. "Where are you? The car's gone," I whispered, barely able to catch my breath. Her voice was tense on the other end. "I'm okay. Some guy tried to get into the car while I was sitting in it." I freaked out, drove to the far side of the lot. "I'm coming back." My stomach dropped. He's still here, following me. I spotted an employee, middle-aged, wearing a red polo. "There's a man outside, following me. My roommate, he tried to get into our car," I blurted. "Stay inside. I'll call security," he said firmly, his eyes narrowing toward the windows. I huddled behind the counter, trying to calm my trembling hands. Even through the glass, I could see him pacing, loitering, waiting. I'd never felt fear so raw, so immediate. Minutes felt like hours. Kayla's car pulled up eventually, and I sprinted to it, throwing myself into the passenger seat. My hands shook so badly I could barely buckle the seatbelt. Kayla leaned over, shouting, "Get in, quick!" And I didn't hesitate. We peeled out of the lot, tires squealing slightly on the asphalt. I dared a glance back. The man was still standing there under the harsh parking lot lights, watching. My chest tightened. Even in motion, I felt the weight of his stare. My hands gripped the seat as if holding on to something tangible could protect me. The streets of San Diego were alive with nightlife, but my mind was fixated on that parking lot, on the hoodie and the ball cap, on the way he'd lingered like he had all the time in the world. Kayla kept glancing at me, silent, letting me process, letting me breathe. Finally, she let out a shaky laugh. "Guess your paranoia isn't so crazy after all," she said. I laughed too, but it was hollow. I couldn't stop imagining him, waiting in the shadows, plotting. We drove home in tense silence, gripping the steering wheel like it might vanish if we let go. Once inside our apartment, I locked the door and checked the windows, pulling the blinds tight. Every creak, every distant shout outside made me jump. I replayed the parking lot over and over in my mind, the way he'd paced, the stillness of his gaze, how utterly calm he seemed. Kayla tried to brush it off. "He's just some creep, Aaron. He doesn't know where we live. Don't obsess." But I couldn't. Something about him felt different. Obsessed, patient, dangerous. And even as I tried to convince myself I was safe, I couldn't shake the thought that he'd been waiting, just waiting for the perfect moment. Over the next few weeks, I noticed subtle changes in my behavior. I checked the parking lot obsessively, walked in pairs when possible, and avoided late-night errands alone. I couldn't help it. Every trip outside, every rustle of leaves or passing shadow sent my heart racing. Kayla noticed, and she got annoyed. "You can't live like this forever, Aaron. You can't let one guy control your life." I knew she was right. but I couldn't shake the memory of his face, the blank stare, the slow, measured movements. It was as if he had been studying me, learning my routines, watching until he found an opportunity. One evening, I was walking to my car after a late study session. My heart nearly stopped when I spotted a figure across the lot, hoodie pulled low over their face. My stomach dropped. I froze. But as I drew closer, it turned out to be another student, fumbling with their keys. Relief flooded me, but the panic didn't fully leave. I realized my mind had been primed, ready to see him everywhere, ready to believe he could be anywhere at any moment. I started carrying pepper spray, double-checking locks, walking briskly, forcing myself to stay alert. The fear was exhausting, but it also made me vigilant. I understood in a visceral way that danger wasn't always obvious, that instinct mattered. I finally spoke with campus security about what happened. They were professional, taking notes, offering advice on safe parking and reporting suspicious activity. They explained that incidents like this, stalkers, opportunistic criminals, were more common than I'd realized. Knowledge helped, gave me some control, but it didn't erase the fear entirely. Kayla was frustrated at first. You're letting it control you. But over time, she understood that awareness didn't equal obsession. It was survival. I realized that fear was a tool, not a prison. I had to respect it, learn from it, but not let it dominate me. Months later, I still remembered him, the man in the hoodie. I never saw him again, but the memory lingered in small ways. A shadow on the sidewalk, the feeling of being watched, the instinct to check behind me. I learned to trust my instincts, to prepare, to be cautious without letting fear take over. The experience changed me. I became more vigilant, more aware of my surroundings, and more protective of those I cared about. I understood that danger doesn't announce itself, and sometimes it comes without warning. Life was fragile, and I had to take steps to protect it while still living it fully. Vigilance and intuition are as important as trust and courage. Awareness doesn't mean paranoia. It means being prepared, protecting yourself, and recognizing that sometimes fear is a guide, not a burden. Being cautious isn't weakness. It's wisdom in a world where danger can appear when you least expect it.